The keynote I want to share with you today is about encountering Israeli apartheid. I want to speak about different examples of intervention that I have been able to learn about through the course of my work. What's happening now is like the behavior of the state of Israel in the geography of Palestine is finally being recognized for what it is, which is like a brutal, savage apartheid regime. We are always focused on the outcomes of this complicated apartheid regime, which are what you see happening to the Palestinian people for almost every day for the past 75 years. So I'm not going to just highlight more of the natural outcomes of Israeli control and apartheid in Palestine. What I want to draw your attention to is political intervention with the Israeli regime and with apartheid. The very first political recognition of apartheid in South Africa did not happen in Africa. And many people say, like, oh, the struggle of the ANC is one, international pressure is another one, diplomacy is another one. And you could see the hypocrisy of international community in the funeral of Nelson Mandela. Like all the countries that have been supporting the maintenance of apartheid South Africa attended that funeral. The one person that did not attend that funeral is the first politician in Europe to recognize apartheid as a crime, and he provided the solution. He said apartheid cannot be reformed. It has to be eliminated. That's the Prime Minister of Sweden, who served from 1982 until 1986. He said that statement. A week later, he was murdered. Up until today, the official stand is like, we do not know who murdered him. So to summarize this point, like whenever we talk about governments around the West that represent a cultural extension of the state of Israel, an economic extension for the state of Israel, whenever we say like those politicians have to recognize Israeli apartheid, what we're saying is that we want Western politicians to be mysteriously murdered. We are saying that they need to have the courage to recognize apartheid as apartheid. No, they need to have the courage of confronting murder. Like, why would a lawyer, an expert in international law, and a lawyer like Barack Obama want to give up his life, right? He was the most powerful man for 8 years on the planet, and he himself would even refuse to recognize Israeli apartheid as Israeli apartheid. And the bottom line is that who wants to be killed? The second thing that have been happening throughout the world is protests, street protests. And I'm talking about the non-governmental rejection and expressions of rejection of the oppression of the Palestinian people, not of apartheid, but actually anybody with a sense of decency on the planet can recognize the brutalization that Palestinians have been surviving over the past 75 years. And those protests are some kind of like expressions of the decency of people themselves. Being in solidarity with the victim is the line between you being a normal citizen of the world and a common person in the world, in the sense that common people usually are after the pursuit of their own personal lives. People do have many personal struggles and personal issues that they have to look after every day. Those like expressions that we look at are expressions of people who will see wrong, and the only way to express that wrong is by going to the street. I'm not being critical of that beautiful expression of humanity that we witnessed this year, we witnessed in 2021, we witnessed for most of the past 75 years, actually. Like people who understand what Palestinians are forced to survive through express that through in the streets whenever they can. So on a executive political level, we have a president that tells us governments are not going to even recognize Israeli apartheid as apartheid. On the streets, yes, any person that's been paying attention to the streets regarding Palestine over the past 75 years knows that Palestine won the battle of the street, Palestine won the battle of academia, Palestine won the battle of trade unions, the popular battle. Palestine is victorious in the hearts and minds of people around the world, but that's not effective. The third intervention is like what the UN has done. Like we are being told that the UN is anti-Semite because the UN has like endless number of resolutions that have been issued from 1947 up until today regarding the issue of Palestine. And actually that is described by defenders and supporters of the State of Israel as like the UN is anti-Semite. Actually, the resolutions just show documentation of Israel's violation of every basic right a human being should have on this planet. And we have hundreds and hundreds of them because violation of Palestinian rights happens in hundreds and hundreds of ways. The UN, you can read about the UN intervention, like most recently, like the UN could not even implement a vote on ceasefire and humanitarian intervention, which was voted by 120 countries. There are 14 countries that stood against it. The United States, Israel, few like, I don't know, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Tonga, I do not know what that is, but very, very popular and influential countries on world politics. It's work. The UN refuses to recognize Israeli apartheid as Israeli apartheid. I want to get your attention to something very important happened in 2016 when Richard Falk was asked to produce a report for ESQA, a UN agency, analyzing Israeli behavior through the lens of apartheid. And that was the very first document, actually, official document, to speak about Israeli apartheid and the mistreatment of the Palestinians to qualify to the crime of apartheid. That report lasted for 2 days only on the website of the UN. It's an official UN document funded by the UN, produced for the UN, and the UN took it off its website after 2 days. And later on, we got the report from Human Rights Watch, the Israeli organization Bethlehem, and most recently, Amnesty International report. So when it comes to UN, they have done their job.